Thank you to the American Council on Education for including me in your annual conference. I wish I could be there in person in San Diego, but I do know there is a great panel of experts following my remarks who can discuss these issues in more depth. Before I get started though, and I want to acknowledge that I'm filming this on March 2nd, so that by the time this is delivered on March 7th, circumstances in Ukraine and in terms of the overall world order could be dramatically different. But I've been thinking a lot about how this has been playing out. I think all of us, whether we're policymakers or leaders in higher education, this has been an exhausting last 3 or 4 years. We had a prior administration that in many ways was anti-intellectual, anti-higher education. We saw an unprecedented attack on our democratic values and the attack on the United States Capitol. We saw for 2+ years complete disruption of our whole community and society. No place has felt that more than higher education. And I know you and I and others have really started to wonder whether democracy can still exist in a world that's become increasingly more polarized, where social media seems to rule the day. But I tell you, I have been remarkably impressed by the people of Ukraine, not only in terms of their spirit, but in many ways what is happening in Ukraine is the people are literally voting with their lives to stand up for the ideas around liberal democracy, around transparency, about the freedom to express your views, the right to vote, to elect your own leaders. And I hope that we maybe can all take a deep breath at this moment and say, well, we face enormous challenges. The people of the world, and we see this not just coming out of Ukraine, but in protests happening all over the world where people are standing with the people of Ukraine, feel passionately that the values that, again, sometimes we take for granted in this country, the value of a liberal arts education, the value of being willing to question authority, the kind of values that all of your institutions represent are really what the world wants. We all can do better. You guys in higher education, and obviously we as policymakers have got a lot of room to find that kind of unity that President Biden spoke about in the State of the Union. But as I talk about the issues around China, I do think we need to both acknowledge and recognize the threat posed by authoritarian regimes, but we also need to acknowledge the fact that our system of government, the notion of a liberal education, the notion of democracy is still where the world wants us to head. So I want to start again by acknowledging the progress that many of you have made in the academic and research communities to understand and counter the threat posed by the People's Republic of China. I believe that both in government and in academia, we've come a long way in understanding the intentions and tactics of the PRC since I started raising the alarm as my chair of the Intelligence Committee back in 2018. And many, many universities have begun to implement a series of measures to better protect United States research. This obviously includes more stringent disclosure requirements around conflict of interest. For example, if a professor is receiving funding from a PRC-related entities, in addition to receiving a salary from the United States University, we need to know about that. We've also seen most universities close down their Confucius Institutes and prevent their faculty from participating in PRC-sponsored foreign talent programs, both of which have been long-established vectors for influence efforts by the Communist Party in China. From my perch on the Intelligence Committee, first as Vice Chairman and now Chairman, I've met with many of you to discuss how the PRC is targeting particularly universities to illicitly acquire intellectual property and technology know-how. As you know, our intelligence community leaders have provided classified briefs to university presidents, CEOs, venture capitalists, and a whole host of other industries on how their sectors were being specifically targeted. And I really appreciate that many of you have participated in what I call the classified road shows I organized in both 2018 and 2019, and which finally now, at the end of 2021 and now in 2022, have restarted. But even with some of this progress, we have to remain vigilant. And I want to restate what the challenge is. The Communist Party of China is actively working to usurp U.S. technology leadership and to dominate a set of advanced technologies that they see as being critical for their economic strength and security over the long term. Unfortunately, they see this as a technological race, as a zero-sum game, not where both can prosper, but where there has to be a winner and a loser. And I believe with all my heart, the CCP seeks to displace the United States and, for that matter, much of the rest of Europe and our allies in Asia, to make sure they win these technology battles and use these technologies, which are so important and being developed on so many of your universities, towards economic and potentially ideological supremacy. As outlined in a set of PRC strategic documents, they laid this out in print, China 2025, China Standards 2035, and other documents. They are working to acquire key United States technologies in aerospace, advanced manufacturing, artificial intelligence, biotech, data analytics, new materials, semiconductors, renewables. As a former telecom guy, I've seen them do it in 5G, and through then their manifestation of that, of their support for Huawei. And what they're hoping to do is literally provide Communist Party dominance in these areas. They are attempting to shape the standards for these technologies in order to influence their wider ecosystem. This is an area where, again, we in the United States and the West have dominated for literally decades on setting standards. You as academic presidents understand that the standard-setting bodies, usually driven by scientists, in many cases are being flooded by both Chinese companies, Chinese government officials, and oftentimes other countries who have been influenced by the Communist Party's efforts. Now, we see they use a variety of methods to acquire these technologies, both targeting our private sector and academia. Now, most relevant to universities, we've seen the CCP conduct cyber thefts targeting U.S. universities to steal sensitive technology. They've also used researchers and faculty to access and steal technology from many of your world-class institutions, oftentimes obscuring the linkage of those individuals that are acting as the CCP's agents, obscuring their linkage to military and intelligence entities in the PRC. PRC-related activities have also created partnerships with universities to access specific technologies of interest and have actively recruited American researchers through these financial incentives I already talked about. We need to be clear. No other country, not even Russia, which does this at a much more minor level, but no other country does this at such scale. The FBI has estimated that China's theft of American intellectual property cost the United States about $500 billion annually. FBI Director Wray told the intel community that the Bureau has been opening a new counter-espionage, counterintelligence investigation into China at almost the rate of twice a day. That is incredible. That is a threat that we have to address. Obviously, let's be clear, this threat is not just occurring at research institutions. It is occurring across the whole private sector. But these figures of 2 new cases being opened today against Chinese efforts shows the breadth of their efforts. And let me be clear, this is not just happening at United States universities. We've seen universities in Australia, the UK, in Germany, and many, many other nations being targeted. This targeting of universities is part of the CCP's multifaceted technology strategy. And I want to make sure folks understand the implications of the United States ceding our leadership in specific technology sectors. We shouldn't forget our proud heritage. Literally since the Second World War, and even more so since the Sputnik moment in the 60s, the United States has led the world in scientific research and development of transformational technologies. That leadership's translated into decades of economic success. And a lot of that technology advancement took place at your universities. We want to make sure that continues. So how do we make sure this goes along? We need to continue to set the global standards in these areas and set protocols. And as we set the standards, our values, and this is again what is being fought over in Ukraine, our values of democracy, transparency, diversity of opinion, and respect for human rights actually have been embedded in the standards and protocols of a lot of the development of these new technologies. You understand that better than most policymakers. I also want to note an issue that we frequently don't pay enough attention to, that the CCP has also worked to advance specific narratives on our university campuses to intimidate and suppress those whose perspectives they deem to be counter to their interests. This transnational repression against U.S. citizens, and oftentimes visiting Chinese students, is in direct violation of our most fundamental values. I want to take, this is very important, and I know this is critical in terms of the discussions I've had with so many of you, both in Virginia and across the nation. I want to take a moment and strongly emphasize that I distinguish my critique of the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping's leadership from the Chinese people. This is not a challenge against the Chinese people or against the Chinese diaspora. And that emphatically means, it does not mean that we should be biased against Chinese Americans, Asian Americans. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, we have seen a surge in anti-Asian incidents, frequently due to dangerous rhetoric around COVID-19. So as we raise these concerns about the CCP, we cannot allow xenophobia or racial profiling to seep into our language or actions. Not only is that counterproductive, but it also plays exactly into the Communist Party of China's messaging efforts to cast Americans, or I've just met with the Australians who have this similar issue, as somehow anti-Asian. As we work to counter the PRC at our universities and beyond, we have to ensure that our approaches are productive. For example, I believe that the Department of Justice decision to suspend the China initiative was the right call. We face other threats. We obviously see this with Russia. Calling out China alone made no sense. Not only were a number of the cases flawed from the start, but many also were perceived the effort as simply persecuting Chinese Americans and or others of Chinese or Asian descent. And candidly, our answer cannot also be to keep talented folks out of the United States. In fact, we have seen that over half of our most valuable startups in the United States, including the folks in Silicon Valley, have been founded by immigrants. Many of those Asian American immigrants, many of those Chinese American immigrants. It is in our national interest to welcome these talented Chinese academics, students, entrepreneurs, and technologists. And in fact, we need to go even broader and make it more attractive, as we did for so many years, for these individuals to use their talents to bolster our economy and our way of life, rather than forcing them out to return to China. Obviously, we still have a lot of work to do, and I urge you to remain focused on this threat. But I'll close with what I started. We are seeing real-time people across the world rally to the cause of democracy, rally to the cause, I believe, of kind of liberal education, based on values of human rights, transparency, respect for others, that is installed in so many of your universities. I hope we take the symbol of this remarkable Ukrainian resistance, regardless of what happens in the short term on the battlefield, to heart, that for all our flaws, we still have the best system in the world, and the kind of not only academic education that comes out of your universities, but the civic responsibility that you install in your students is more important than ever. Thank you so much.